Welcome to those who are joining. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes to give folks enough time to hop onto the webinar. We'll get started shortly. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. You are here today to attend the webinar on behalf of Enterprise Community Partners. We will be reviewing the King County funding opportunity that is specific to early learning facilities. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. In these really challenging times, it's nice to have the opportunity to spend a few minutes focusing on something that will help bring resource and equity and partnership in our communities. So we're pleased to talk about this. I'm Emily Alvarado. I'm the Vice President and Market Leader for the Pacific Northwest office at Enterprise Community Partners. And for those of you who don't know, Enterprise is a national organization, a national nonprofit organization that works on affordable housing and community development. And we do that by addressing issues from all sides, providing financing and loans to support affordable housing and community development. We do programs and innovation, and we also do policy and advocacy. And locally here in the Pacific Northwest, we focus on, one, providing capacity to community-based organizations. We help catalyze affordable housing development across the region through investments in pre-development, technical assistance, and capacity supports. And we have our incredible programming around early learning facilities funding, one fund source of which you're going to hear about today. I should say at Enterprise, our mission is to make home and community places of pride, power, and belonging. And our focus areas are really on increasing the housing supply of affordable housing, advancing racial equity, and building resilience and upward mobility. And I'm really pleased that we're able to be partners in this critical work of creating more early learning facilities, because we know that's a key piece of our effort to build resilience and upward mobility, to advance racial equity, and also in cases where early learning is co-located with affordable housing, to also increase the housing supply. So I thank you all for coming. You're going to have the privilege today of primarily listening to Juanita speak, our star and leader on early learning facilities funding and issues at Enterprise. We look forward to your questions. We have a Q&A box below where you can ask questions and we'll go ahead and answer them. And again, thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your support. And we look forward to getting to work on making sure that there's more equitable and supportive places for early learning across our county. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Thank you everyone for joining today. We're so excited and humbled to be talking to you all about early learning facilities funding and specific to King County. My name is Juanita Salinas-Aguila. I'm the program director at Enterprise Community Partners and am the lead in all things early learning. A quick agenda on what we will be reviewing today in the hour. We'll talk a little bit about our loan fund, our Washington Early Learning Loan Fund. We'll move into discussing the King County PASTA funding and our program goals and funding timelines, which I'm sure everyone is eager to hear about how that funding and services will be rolled out. We will set aside some time for questions at the end of this webinar, probably the last 10 or 15 minutes. If you have questions, please feel free to add them into the Q&A box and we will answer them towards the end. All right, so our Early Learning Loan Fund, the WELL Fund, who are we? Enterprise initially received a $5 million allocation from the state of Washington, and we very graciously received a program launching investor from the Balmer Fund, which actually allowed us to launch our programmatic efforts and achieve high success with our loan fund. We later received private and philanthropic investments from the Gates Foundation and the Seattle Foundation. These different funding sources allowed us to essentially put together what is our loan fund. We have a creative mix of funding sources that allow us to provide funding opportunities for early learning facilities throughout the state. Unique funding sources for unique projects who are in need of either grants or lending. When we launched in January of 2020, despite in the middle of a pandemic, we are grateful that we were successful due to the original partnership that creates the WELL Fund. The WELL Fund is a partnership between Enterprise Community Partners and two other community development financial institutions. One is the Washington Community Reinvestment Association, or the WCRA, and the other is Craft 3, which is a leading small business lender with offices throughout Washington and Oregon. I just want to say a big shout out and thank you to these partners, WCRA and Craft 3. It has been a very fulfilling journey these last 2 years of partnership. We've learned so much from one another and on how to best serve and fund early learning providers and develop more facilities throughout the state. So with our partnerships intact and our funding sources intact, we did launch in January of 2020, and we've had a wonderful success and outcomes and a lot of learning opportunities. Our mission is to provide catalytic funding to nurture the growth of early learning facilities across Washington state and increase access and availability to quality early learning facilities for children and families. We do this by providing funding in the form of, one, real estate loans. We use real estate loans to develop and increase capacity in early learning centers. Real estate loans can be offered for new construction, expansion of early learning facilities, or financing for developers who are incorporating early learning facilities into a mixed-use development. We also offer small business lending to early learning providers that can cover facilities improvements in owned or leased space, startup expenses, or furnishing and equipment. We also provide grants. In the now almost 3 years of launching, we've been able to provide 2 grant rounds. We've done 1 pre-development grant round, and we had the opportunity to do an emergency COVID-19 renovation grant round in our first year of launching. We also offer a tremendous amount of technical assistance to all of our funded projects, as well as our pipeline of projects that are at different stages of development. We offer TA in the early learning sector. We do TA in real estate project development, construction, and timeline. We do financial technical assistance that allows programs to tap into much needed resources and supports to develop their pro formas in anticipation to financing and helping them identify additional leverage funding sources. We do offer mixed use technical assistance to support those co-located projects of affordable housing and early learning providers. And we do, of course, now and moving forward, offer ongoing COVID-19 support as it relates to its impact on early learning providers and projects. Funded projects, especially our grant recipients, are currently receiving project management support to ensure their construction projects move along smoothly and receive aid should any challenges arise. The question is often asked, who do we lend and grant to? We are able to fund a variety of different individuals and organizations, from licensed early learning providers, those who operate centers or family in-home programs. We can fund housing developers who are partnering with early learning providers, tribal organizations, nonprofits, CBOs, school districts, or emerging providers, anyone who is embarking on the journey of opening up their own childcare center or family in-home daycare. One of the most proudest things that I'd like to share about our Well Fund is our prioritization of our racial equity lens and outcomes. Since launching, we have prioritized using a racial equity approach to all of our outreach, TA, grant, and RFP processes and our loan deals. We've done intentional outreach to providers of color and BIPOC-led and owned organizations. We have and supported providers who serve communities of color, and especially those who are providing culturally competent care. And all of our pipeline and funded projects serve low-income communities, communities of color, multilingual, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and those projects and programs that serve children with special needs or those who are experiencing homelessness or who are in foster care. Out of our 28 funded programs, we've had tremendous amount of outcomes and impacts. As you can see, most of our projects are BIPOC-led or owned, are women-led or owned. Many of them provide multilingual supports and bilingual support programming. An even higher amount are programs that are also in regions where access to childcare is limited. And 100% of our programs serve low-income children and families. Very proud of our successes thus far. Wanted to make sure that those on this call are able to see some of our strengths in this work. Since launching, we've been able to distribute about $9.6 million to early learning facilities throughout the state, and that's through loans and grants. You can see we've done a number of loans, 23 grants. This has been able to create about 122 new classrooms with nearly 2,000 childcare slots, with, of course, racial equity outcomes in BIPOC ownership. Now onto our King County PASTA funding, why we all are here today. I wanted to take a moment to quickly cover what PASTA is. PASTA is a very unique acronym. It's a very funny acronym, but it's an acronym nonetheless. PASTA stands for the Puget Sound Taxpayer Accountability Account. Quite a mouthful. PASTA was created as an amendment to the 2015 State Transportation Revenue Package. So as many of you have seen the expansion of the light rail through all of our communities, the construction of that light rail and the percentages of sales and taxes generated from that expansion is required to go back to the county to help achieve educational outcomes in early learning, K-12, and post-secondary education. This was a result of much advocacy, of community effort, community voice to ensure that these taxes and sales go back to the county. After that was secure, the county hosted a very lengthy community engagement process to develop an implementation plan for these funds. This included early learning providers themselves, stakeholders, advocates, community members, to ensure that this funding is specific to the communities who need it the most and communities most impacted. So all in all, the county is expected to receive about, it's an estimated $318 million over the next 15 to 20 years. Of that total, 52% of that will go to early learning facilities specifically. The next 15 to 20 years, we'll see a lot of this funding come down the pipeline. Last summer in June, the county put forward an RFP to identify who would be managing such important and critical work. I'm proud to say that Enterprise did apply to this competitive RFP process. We spent several weeks on this RFP to ensure that we were able to put forward our expertise and our skills to lead this work. We are very happy and humbled to say that we have been selected to manage the PASTA funding for King County, specific to early learning centers. We will be able to manage about $15 million over the next 5 years. And so these taxes are being generated over the next 20 years, but the funding will come as it's being constructed. So the first 5 years, we'll see about $15 million of that total large amount. Want to just say a big thank you to our partners and all those who made this RFP possible, those who provided letters of recommendations and who supported us in achieving this wonderful opportunity to manage such important funds. I'm going to invite Justine Valoria from the county to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. I'm Justine Valoria, and I am the PASTA Early Learning Facilities Program Manager for King County. I just want to say that we are really excited to work and partner with Enterprise in this incredibly important work. The PASTA funding and this partnership between the county and Enterprise will allow our early learning community to expand and thrive, and to give our kids and families in their communities quality, affordable childcare options throughout. So we're really looking forward to supporting enterprise and everyone involved in advancing early learning access in our region. Thank you, Juanita, for putting this together. This is so awesome, and we're really excited to partner with you.
Thank you, Justine. Appreciate you and your time. All right. So I'm going to shift gears and talk a little bit about our program goals and timeline. What does Enterprise and the Well Fund have planned as of now to distribute the services and funding that is PASTA? I'm going to focus primarily on the rest of this year, 2022, and early 2023 deliverables for this funding. The first most critical service that we'll be offering is to expand upon our current technical assistance services that we do. Technical assistance is critical to achieving any early learning facilities projects throughout the region. Many of our early learning providers and educators are skilled at caring for and educating our children throughout the state. And it would be unrealistic to assume that early learning providers know how to embark on a construction project or an architectural drawings and permitting and all of the things that go into a development projects. And so one of the main things we'll be doing is providing TA to eligible organizations that are interested in PASTA funding. This includes early learning TA, so advice and support around licensing, curriculum development, connections to other broader early learning supports like DCYF and EA. Project TA, as mentioned, helping projects and programs navigate the development process from construction, tenant improvement, timeline, permitting, design, etc. Financial TA, developing and improving budgets, pro formas, in anticipation to financing. Real estate development, we are all educators and experts at what we're doing, and real estate is another area that we want to make sure that folks feel supported in. Another key area that we will expand upon and is the connections and referrals to other key partners. We want to make sure that those reaching out to us and are connected to us, whether or not they are funded, have the connections to other key experts that would help them in their projects, wherever stage they are at. And of course, ongoing COVID-19 response work. I'm sure we will be seeing the impacts of COVID in this area. So we want to make sure that we are continuing to meet the needs of providers where they're at in an ever-changing economic situation that COVID has impacted. Emerging providers is another area in which our programmatic efforts will meet the needs of our communities. This builds off our work as racial equity lens the Well Fund has been prioritizing. We want to ensure that over the next several years, we will see new providers coming online that represent the communities they serve. For that reason, we are going to develop a process to identify a cohort of emerging providers who are interested in expansion. That's going to be about a minimum of 3 different providers. These different providers we define emerging providers as existing family child care providers who do not currently own or operate child care centers, or existing providers who perhaps currently work in a leadership capacity and are interested in embarking and opening their own child care center. We want to look at providers who meet programmatic priorities and services to children and families. And as defined in King County's original implementation plan and desired outcomes. We will be looking at providers who can help achieve that racial equity outcomes, those who serve low-income communities of color, multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious communities, and children with special needs, and those children serving children who may be experiencing homelessness or who are in foster care. And those, of course, who are already delivering culturally competent care. This cohort will receive one-on-one technical assistance in all the ways that I've mentioned before, but we will have additional experts come on board and have weekly, monthly time spent as sort of an expert mentor, someone to guide them through the process of opening up a brand new childcare center. So this is going to be a process that will take us through the next 5 years. As of right now, the process to identify this cohort is still to be determined, but these emerging providers is something that we're very excited about to be able to bring brand new programs and centers online. The third way in which we will be releasing our services as funding is through, of course, hosting a grant opportunity. We do plan to release an RFP, a request for proposal, grant opportunity later this year. We are still in development for this, for the exact date of when this will be released. In a little while, I'll be going through a timeline in which you'll see about when we plan on doing that. But I do want to take a moment to talk about this grant release in specific to who can be eligible for this funding and how much we plan to release. So this PASTA funding grant will be available for pre-development construction and or renovation projects. And I want to emphasize that this grant will be specific to childcare centers. Eligible organizations that can apply to this upcoming grant includes childcare providers currently open either centers only, nonprofits or CBOs who are constructing new or expanding current childcare facilities, housing developers who are partnering with early learning providers, tribal entities, school districts, and emerging providers as well. The group of folks that I mentioned in our previous slide would be eligible for these grant funds. We will be releasing additional eligibility requirements as this RFP is drafted. Some of those additional eligibility requirements can include things like how much subsidy a program plans on taking, the types of services a program is offering, and will also, of course, include project scope of work and other applicant specific questions in a grant application. Once we do identify a release date, we will host a couple of webinars for folks to attend to help get a little bit of Q&A and guidance about the specifics of when that application is released. The funding that we will have available for this grant will be about $1 million, perhaps a little more than that. The number of grants this could cover could be about 10, and we are estimating about $100,000 per grant. Now, this is subject to change. Of course, this is also dependent on how many applications we do receive and how much specific funding we have. But we do know that we will have about $1 million to put out the door in the form of grants using this RFP in the year 2022. Okay. We will also be offering lending opportunities using these PASTA funding. This is different than the grants in that we offer lending and financing opportunities on an ongoing basis. All of our lending with these PASTA funds will be conducted through our well fund partner, the Washington Community Reinvestment Association. Their mission is to meet Washington's affordable housing and economic development needs through partnership. Their lending opportunities will include financing for early learning facilities construction, expansion, rehabilitation, and acquisition. Matching funds that WCRA provides will allow them to create flexible below market financing options for borrowers. We all know that early learning facilities projects are all very unique to where they're at and what their needs are. And so exact terms for each deal might be to be determined, but I can say that through the Well Fund's track record, we have been able to achieve very flexible below market financing options. We've been able to do very successful deals through the WCRA using our unique funding sources. And PASTA will be able to build upon that ability to continue to offer more equitable and flexible lending opportunities for early learning providers. We will have in 2022 about $1 million to offer for early learning facility financing. How many different kinds of deals or the amount is very dependent on who is ready to take on a lending need and depending on where their project is at. I'm going to invite Susan Duran, the president of the WCRA, to come online and share a few words at this time.
Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Duran with Washington Community Reinvestment Association. Our organization was formed in 1992, and we make loans to both nonprofits and for-profits for affordable rental housing and economic development across Washington state. We have started our work in early learning facilities, and we are thrilled to be a part of the PASTA transactions so that we can continue that work and create more early learning facilities for people who need to have childcare across the state. Thank you, Enterprise, for inviting us to be a part of this partnership, and we look forward to continuing our work for early learning facilities. Where did it go?
Thank you so much, Susan. I appreciate you sharing a few words with us today. The WCRA and Enterprise will continue our strong partnership to ethically and equitably think about PASTA funding in service of King County residents. If I have not already mentioned, I want to also emphasize that the King County PASTA funds are specific to King County, and the PASTA funds are specific to go towards organizations or child care centers that serve King County children and families. A quick pause here. I know that there are questions coming in through the Q&A and through the chat. So just know that we will allocate a good 15 minutes, if not a little bit more, of this hour to answering those questions that are coming through as best we can. All right. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our anticipated timeline for delivering these services and funding to the county. We are obviously already in the second quarter of 2022. Up until this point, we have and will continue to create and strengthen our current and new community partnerships. We'll be spending lots of time building community capacity. And we will be spending time developing our internal programmatic systems to help ensure that we are ethically, equitably, and accurately managing this funding source and continuing our system improvement. So in this second quarter, we'll be emphasizing a lot of program planning development internally. We'll be doing a lot of systems building, ensuring that we are ready to track data, to conduct accurate marketing and outreach communications to communities. And we do anticipate to expand our team. This work is not done by one person, but a multitude of folks, right? And we want to really make sure that we have the right team to help deliver our services. That includes consultants that are experts in the work that they do and working with early learning providers as well as staff. Quarter 3 of 2022, we do anticipate to begin, if not continue to deliver our technical assistance goals. During quarter 3, we will identify we'll identify our process to select and host a selection process to identify those emerging provider cohort members. We also plan to release that grant funding opportunity in the third quarter of this year. So that will be anytime between July and July and September. Note one more time, quarter 3 is when we plan on releasing the grant funding opportunity sometime between July and September of this year. Quarter 4 of this year, October through December, we will be continuing to deliver our technical assistance services. We will continue to build our pipeline and support those emerging providers. We will, after posting and closing a grant opportunity, quarter 4 will see us review and select PASTA-funded grantees. So I should mention that our application process does take 1 to 2 months. If we post a grant opportunity in the third quarter, we will undergo a selection process and will identify those grantees before the end of 2022. Throughout this process, we will also identify the loan needs for borrowers through the support of our partners at the WCRA. And so at the end of the year, we'll really see us successfully having identified those emerging cohort members, having hosted and identified grants, and as well as identified loan needs for potential borrowers. I mentioned that Enterprise and the Wealth Fund will be managing a total of $15 million over the next 5 years. So in 2023, we do anticipate continued funding to come through for us. And every year for the next 5 years, we will see funding opportunities for PASTA recipients. So we will be hosting another grant round and continuous lending opportunities into 2023 and beyond. Every year, and even more often than that, we will be conducting continuous improvement with our program delivery of service. We will continue technical assistance and building community capacity as we move forward in the next 5 years. We do anticipate and are very dedicated to meeting the needs of early learning programs as they stand in that moment. This is an ever-changing field, and the needs, we hope that we meet the needs that providers are facing in that time. Some of the ongoing work is continuous program assessment and improvement into 2023 and beyond. And of course, a prioritization of racial equity and looking at the impacts and outcomes as we move through this work. Okay, so we are officially at 12:40. I want to thank you all for hanging tight throughout our presentation today. I'd like to move us to the Q&A time of this webinar. What we'll do here is we will go ahead and go through the Q&A box and answer questions live. So I'll go ahead and read the questions and answer them live. So if you have a question, please feel free to add those in. We have the next 20 minutes to answer questions. And if we get finished before the hour, then wonderful, you all have extra time on your calendars. So the first question, yes, the first question is not fully a question, but a comment, and that I totally agree with. The first question that says, given the Department of Commerce's early learning facilities grants opportunities are now closed, it is vital that this grant opportunity is available sooner than later. I absolutely concur, Margine. This funding source is going to be critical, and the quickest we can get it online, the better. Our priority is to ensure that we're able to meet the needs and also respond quickly. So thank you for that. Okay, thank you, Taylor, for helping to manage this Q&A box. The scope of work for this funding and approximately how much would be available for each applicant. So Chris, we will have about $1 million to put out the door in the form of grants for this funding source. We anticipate that with $1 million, we will be able to do about 10 different grants at $100,000 each. This is subject to change. I mean, that really is dependent on how many applications we receive and what projects financially are needing at the time, right? Alongside grants, we will have about $1 million to put out the door in the form of loans. So there may be projects who may need some gap financing. There may be at the point where taking on some financing is needed. So that will be an opportunity as well. The scope of this funding is to support the expansion and construction of new early learning facilities throughout King County. And I will add that when grants do become online, we will offer more specific eligibility requirements. A question from Chris. Hello, Chris. If we are already working with the WCRA on the loan request, will the PASTA grant application be combined with this request or handled separately? You know, we often have grantees who have received grants from the Well Fund and who also are receiving a loan from one of our two lending partners. And so we do handle those separately, but one of the things that we prioritize and look at is wanting to make sure we're helping projects as much as we can. So it's not unheard of that projects can receive a grant and a loan from the Well Fund. Hello, Robin, could you repeat the funding totals? So I'll have to do a little bit math out on top of my head right now. So through the county will receive about $315 million over the next 20 years. Of that total, 50% of that will go to early learning facilities. So let's just say in the next 15 to 20 years, the county will receive about $150 million in early learning facilities funding. Now, these first 5 years, $115 million is a lot of money. The first 5 years, however, we'll see about 15 million of that. I hope that makes sense. To clarify the question, Taylor, I think I did receive the last part of Robin's question. I believe Robin wanted to ask as far as, if we see $15 million, why not $3 million a year? Well, the funding for PASTA is taken from the construction and expansion of the early learning light rail system. And depending on how quickly they move through their projects and their construction timeline means how much we get every year. So we won't get the exact amount of funding every year. Some years we might see 3 million, some years we might see 1, and it's really dependent on that construction. So I hope that makes sense in terms of why we might see an ebb and flow in funds coming through each year, but the total amount at the end of that 5-year period will be about 15 million. And it's about also about scale in terms of that funding and building on and having new providers come on board. All right, let's see here. All right, just a second. So the next comment in question is the money focused more on the 3 cohort members who are accepted? Oh, I see Emily is typing an answer to help clarify. Thank you, Emily. Actually, I will add invite, I would say, Emily to also type in answers to some of these questions so we have enough time to get through them. I'll clarify that the PASTA funding grants that we will be putting out each year will not only help provide funding and opportunities for emerging organizations, but also for organizations that aren't part of emerging providers, right? So this isn't necessarily going to be specific to those emerging providers, but in addition to. So we will be able to fund organizations that are not part of the emerging provider cohort. The expected project time period for grant funded project, we do anticipate, I'm not sure if you mean the grant period as in time, but we've done 1 to 2 years for grants in the past. That's dependent on the specific projects and where they're at in their timeline. Yes, Christina asks the question, can a nonprofit apply as a property owner on behalf of the partnership? Yes, a nonprofit community center can apply on behalf, as long as they are partnering with an early learning provider and will have a licensed facility on site. No, Deborah, you do not have to have a building or site already identified. We will be able to provide funding opportunities in the form of pre-development or feasibility, which can allow folks an opportunity to develop the groundwork that it takes to identify a site or building. So we do have some of that pre-development dollars available. Ginger, we don't yet have selecting criteria for those emerging provider cohorts. I will add that we do welcome opportunities to receive some feedback on how that can be done, and we'll be developing that later this year. But we do, in terms of timeline, Ginger, we hope to have an emerging provider cohort identified before the end of 2022. Okay. All right, so sorry, this is the first time I've used this Q&A box, so they keep moving around at me, so I have to track. All right, so we did have a question of how much Oh, just a second. It moved again on my screen. So my apologies, folks. Okay. PASTA funds will support the admin and overhead costs of facility construction and renovation. We do have a cap that is minimal. The county and enterprise has a priority to ensure that most of the funding go to actual grants and lending. I don't have the exact amount in front of me as far as how much will go to admin and overhead costs, but I do want to say that about, I would say 90% of total funding will go towards technical assistance, grants, lending, and overall community impacts. A question from Chris again. The application process will entail, we usually do an internal system, an online application, which folks can apply to through SlideRoom is the software system that we tend to use. It will go through a series of technical questions on who and what kind of program is applying, and will cover questions around project scope of work and financial needs and where they're at. If you are interested in having a much more detailed conversation, I'm more than happy to take time to talk about that on a one-on-one meeting as well. Let's see here. Taylor, can you tell me if I've missed some, or are there other questions that are in the chat? I see there's some chat. Can you let me know if I've missed any at this point?
I believe we've answered all of the questions in the Q&A box, and then there are, looks like 3 or 4 questions in the chat box. So if you, can you open your chat box? Do you have access to your chat box?
Yes, I see it now. Okay, I see a new question here. Am I eligible for this funding if I'm applying for the Child Care Facilities Fund through King County? So the funding that Enterprise and the Well Fund will be managing are PASTA funds that are specific to the development and construction of child care centers specifically. So larger facilities. If you identify as a licensed family child care program, if you own or operate your own licensed family child care program, you would not be eligible for this funding source, as this is specific to the centers. However, given our priorities and expanding opportunities for what we call emerging providers, we do look at individuals who are embarking on opening up a new center. If you are a licensed family child care program that is wanting to take a leap from family home care to opening up your own center, then you can be eligible for these funds. Renee asks, would affordable housing providers be able to submit one application for all King County affordable communities in portfolio? Would the application be needed for each location wanting to request funding? Renee, right now, all of our applications are separate and operate separately given the different funding sources for each type of application. So if interested in applying for the early learning facilities PASTA funding that Enterprise and the Well Fund will be putting out the door, you would want to apply separately. Robin, to clarify, is it 1 million per year or 1 million per year? But that will ebb and flow as each year progresses. So this year we will have $1 million to put out the door in grants. And You mentioned you estimated 10 grants given in 2022 for about $100,000. Is that 10 childcare centers, or could this also be school districts builder? Yes. To clarify your question, Estelle, the 10 grants that will be given can be given and granted to a variety of different kinds of organizations. So that could be a school district that's building a new center or classrooms. It could be developers who are applying because they are partnering and building a childcare center. It could be a nonprofit or CBO, or it could be a current operating childcare centers looking to expand. So it could be a variety of different organizations. Is there a timeline for using the funds once awarded? Yes, this is a great question. Will global supply chain shortages and shipping challenges be considered if projects end up being delayed? You know, this is a great question. I really appreciate someone asking this. Enterprise has been able to deliver 2 different grant rounds since we launched, and one of them was specific to COVID renovations. Now, initially, as a standard, we leave our grants cycles timeline, so to speak, open for 1 year. But as we all know, the entire country, if not world, has seen shortages, shipping challenges, delays, construction delays. I'm proud to say that we have worked very closely with all of our grantees, have been very flexible. We've conducted many extensions for our current grantees. And so this will always be considered to our grantees if they're faced with those types of challenges and shortages that I'm sure many construction projects in many different fields are experiencing. Okay, a quick time check. I hope I've gotten through all the questions. It is 12:57. I want to go ahead and put my name and contact information on this slide for those of you who are interested in reaching out to me. We do ongoing work in outreach to programs who are interested in funding. The WELL Fund, as mentioned, has a number of different types of funding sources. This King County PASTA funding will be added to that to help build on our work, our technical assistance, and our funding opportunities through lending and grants. So please feel free to reach out to me directly. We can set up a time to meet to answer any more specific project-specific questions you may have. I know every project is very unique, complex, and I'm happy to go deep on any one project to think about next steps or eligibility for WELL Fund resources. So I want to thank you all so much for attending and spending an hour with us today. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thank you all for joining. A recording of this PowerPoint should be available after today. So for those who may have missed today, please feel free to send those to others. Thank you all, and I appreciate your time.